Hey folks, Robert Sims here. I am a therapist who specializes in ADHD. So I'm here to talk to you today about resolutions and plans and how New Year's resolutions aren't a great idea, but plans are because resolutions are usually very rigid, where you can't change it without breaking it, whereas plans are meant to be adaptable, changeable, flexible. The big thing about why flexibility matters is because with ADHD, we tend to kind of be all or nothing mentality. When you do a resolution, trying to finish it is very, very hard. If we plan for something, that allows us to have flexibility, it allows us to adapt, it allows us to change things depending on the surrounding environment. When we inevitably get sidetracked or distracted or overwhelmed or overstimulated, it can be really, really hard to try and continue down the same path as what we had originally planned. An example of this would be every year, Yoga with Adrian does a 30-day yoga program for January. And I've been trying to do this for the last 5 years. I've never actually completed the 30 days. And so I was like, okay, I want to do the 30 days this year. It is 10 days into it, and I'm only on day 7, so I've already missed a few days. Now, it would have been easy for me when I missed the first one to go, well, I'm not going to hit the 30 days. There's no point, and give up. But I have had to be flexible. Sometimes I'm able to do it in the morning. Sometimes I'm not. I've had to do it in the office, and actually one of the adjoining offices on my lunch hour. Sometimes I can do it, and there's been a few times I haven't because stuff has happened. Instead of setting a resolution to do this, I had more of a plan, and I've had to change and adapt as I've gone through. That's just kind of one specific example of what I've been doing and how this has kind of impacted my approach. Planning as opposed to resolutions is going to look different for everyone. So I've probably tried 80% of the ADHD productivity planning to do lists out there. And the only thing that has worked for me is my iPhone and my Mac and kind of the integration. So I use the calendar, I integrate the calendars, I use the reminders, and I use the notes. Everything is kind of linked and synced to everything else, which has really worked for me. But again, that's what has worked for me. Other people, things have worked for them. When you're trying to think of what can I do that's going to help me, trial and error. Discuss different things, try different things. If something works, great. If it doesn't, it's okay. It doesn't mean that it's your fault. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. Just because you didn't succeed does not mean you failed. So trial and error is just a huge part of trying to find strategies that works for you. Some kind of practical and actionable advice on creating flexible plans is really trying to figure out what works for you. And a big part of that is trying not to be neurotypical. And what I mean by that is not doing things by the standard of which society thinks that you should. So an example would be putting things away. Things need to be clear, they need to be clean, you don't have clutter. With ADHD, a lot of times, out of sight, out of mind, right? How often have you put something away, you can't find it, you're like, you go out and you buy it, and then you find the thing that you bought an hour or two or a day or two later. You're like, great, now I have two, right? If it's where you put it, where you can see it, where you can use it, and it makes sense for you, great. Don't worry about, well, it's not what society says I should do. If it works for you, then it works for you. Part of that is trying to set things up the way that it works for you, setting realistic goals. So part of it's like, oh, hey, this thing is going to take me 5 minutes. Triple it. It's going to take me 15 minutes. Even if it doesn't, great. You now have more time. But you haven't set yourself up for failure. You haven't set yourself up for frustration. It's kind of trying to get rid of that all or nothing mentality and breaking tasks into smaller steps. So instead of looking at a place and be like, I have to do all of it, like I'm going to clean the kitchen, and be like, I have to clean everything in the kitchen. It's I'm going to tackle one area and I'm going to do that. And then if I have time, energy, whatever to do something else, then I can do that. But it's trying to kind of break this big thing into smaller pieces, and that makes sense. It's also about understanding that it's okay to adjust and change as needed. So if you go in thinking, I'm going to do X, and you get a phone call or an emergency or something happens with your kid, sometimes you need to pivot and do something else. And that's okay. Sometimes you can come back to it, sometimes you can't. To kind of summarize everything, it's really about how can you move forward in a way that makes sense for you rather than trying to be rigid and doing what is expected of you or what you think society says you should do. It's how can you do it in a way that makes sense for you, makes sense for your neurodivergence, makes sense for your ADHD, makes sense for your energy levels, makes sense for kind of any other issues that are impacting on you. Instead of trying to be rigid and confined in your plans, it's trying to develop compassion for yourself and for the plans that you have, and understanding that just because things don't happen maybe the way that you expected that they would doesn't mean that it's not going to happen or that you can't change and pivot and do something different. I invite everybody to explore the different resources that I have on my website, on my social media handles, www.embodiedresilience.ca. You can find me on Instagram at Embodied Resilience. You can find me on Facebook at Embodied Resilience, and of course on my YouTube channel. As well, I offer in-person counseling in London, Ontario, and virtual counseling all through Ontario. Please like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.